Welcome to Plugged In, Exploring Energy, a podcast miniseries with Constellation, where we explore the evolving landscape of energy solutions. In each episode, we bring industry leaders and experts to discuss the latest innovations, challenges, and opportunities in the energy sector.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Bazaj, and I'm the Vice President of Sustainability Solutions at Constellation. On this episode of Plugged In, Exploring Energy, we're excited to be with Ryan Kelley, Global Carbon Footprint Reduction Champion from WL Gore Associates. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. Excited.
Ryan, we always like to start by letting our audience get to know you a little. Could you tell us a little bit about your career and WL Gore?
Sure. I'll start with Gore. So WL Gore is a global material sciences company. We've got a diverse array of products spanning from medical devices, protective fabrics is where I work most closely, electronics, and a host of other products out there in the world. I've been at Gore for 17 years. I worked for a small private engineering firm for about 8 years prior to coming here. And I actually have a background in electrical engineering. I spent the first 2/3 or so of my career building machines and designing software to build our products, to build Gore products, and mostly for our medical business, implantable devices. About 10 years ago, I found myself wanting to get closer to our products, or products that I thought that were cool, right? Luckily, I didn't need those implantable devices, closer to our customers. And I've always had a passion around the outdoors and sustainability. So I moved over to our Gore Fabrics business, where I spent a number of years leading engineering and new product development teams. Somewhere along that way, about 5 or 6 years ago, I co-founded a global grassroots sustainability organization within Gore. And that kind of got me on the enterprise's sustainability radar. And in 2020, when Gore as an enterprise announced publicly Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon reduction goals, a member of our enterprise sustainability team reached out to me and said, "Hey, Ryan, do you know anybody kind of in your sustainability network who might be interested in helping us developing strategy and tactics to achieve those Scope 1 and Scope 2 goals?" And I thought, yeah, I know someone pretty well, actually. I think that's me, and with my engineering background, I think I'd be really good at it. And I would be excited to join that team if given the opportunity. And luckily, it all worked out in 2021 or early 2021. I moved over to an enterprise carbon team focused on Scope 1 and Scope 2 reductions across all of Gore's businesses. And over the last couple of years, that role has evolved into what now is primarily a role focused on our Gore Fabrics business, where it's a little more hands-on in our operational facilities, where I'm the global Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon reduction champion for Gore Fabrics, responsible for operations in the United States, Germany, and in China. I still have I wear a couple of different hats, but one of them is still an enterprise hat, where I help align overall enterprise carbon strategy with our individual business strategies. And then I have some level of accountability for our overall energy footprint in the US. So those who do my role for other businesses sit in Europe. So I'm kind of boots on the ground here in the US. So anything that's kind of spanning multiple businesses, multiple locations that are within the same region here in the US, I tend to get involved in some of those conversations just because I'm local, speak the native language.
Well, thanks, Ryan. I'm kind of glad that you identified the best person for the role back then. It worked out very nicely. And
I did share it, to be clear. I was like, I will share this, but to be clear, I'm going to, throw my hat in too.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I've been very impressed by WL Gore and the passion that your company has for sustainability. You've set some pretty aggressive targets. One of them is 100% renewable electricity target across manufacturing by 2025. Could you tell us a little bit more about that goal? Like I said, it's aggressive. So how was it set? And why did you decide on 2025 as the year?
Yeah, so that was not one of our original goal sets. And it fell out of our overall Scope 1 and Scope 2 strategy, which we've sort of separated, right? We've got a specific Scope 1 strategy, which is 99% natural gas that we consume in our facilities. And our Scope 2 strategy is all around our electricity footprint. It's all electricity consumption globally. So on the Scope 2 side, we've had a number of things in place. We have had a PPA with Constellation in place since day one. That was a huge part of our strategy, a key building block. It supplies all of our US East electric, and that's about half of our global footprint. We got a heavy base in the US East. Those renewable markets are mature, and we were playing there for a number of years and sort of already had that area of the world handled with bundled contracts from our utility providers there. But the thing that enabled us to disclose and publicly announce and set out a 100% renewable goal by 2025 was we had quicker success than we thought we would have in Asia Pacific. So those markets developed rapidly, specifically China and Japan opened up. We engaged early, worked with our procurement teams to procure contracts really similar to what we do in Europe. And that put us in a position to have like our entire base covered with 100% renewable electricity. We say, hey, that's feasible. It's now realistic. Let's do it, right? So then we kind of put that marker out there. That was probably in 2023 or so. And we're just waiting for some of the final pieces of the puzzle to get constructed, come online, and put us in this position where we are now.
Asia is interesting because a lot of our customers have challenges in Asia. That seems to be the piece where they're not able to get to their goal. What did you do that made you successful in Asia?
Yeah, so some of it's where we are in Asia. Honestly, it's where we are in Asia. So I don't work as closely with Japan, so I can't speak too much to that, pardon me. But in China, we're in Shenzhen, which is near Hong Kong. It's in that southeast part of China where there's a lot of emphasis on renewables and industry and business. So that market opened up as one of the first in the Guangzhou Energy Training Center. We were there, we engaged early, kind of got in line right away. We were able to procure those through the local utility providers there. So it's certainly not as easy in other areas of Asia. We have suppliers in those areas and we know their challenges are very different.
Right. One of the other things we hear from a lot of companies is putting a strategy like this together is difficult for them just because they're working across so many different internal functions and stakeholders. And that communication to align on a specific goal is hard to do. How did you deal with that issue?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really enjoy about Gore is, the sustainability team we're not just a green team in the corner way over here, right? Like we're integrated into all of our businesses, all of our functions. Sustainability is a key part of the business outcomes we're trying to drive. And therefore we have that sustainability strategy, our carbon strategy, our energy strategy embedded across all of our functions within our organization. Key ones that really get hit hard are our procurement teams that we go out and get those contracts I was referring to. Our facilities team gets heavily taxed, right? So as we talk about changing the energy footprint in our facilities, we need more electricity. We need to change how we heat the buildings. Those things all pull on the facilities team. And our engineering teams get pulled in as we build new equipment, build new products. We need new machines to do that. Traditionally, those machines may have had a natural gas component, right? May have had a thermal oven that used gas. For pollution control, they use gas, and we want to now be fully electrified options. So we need those engineering teams to identify those solutions and then build equipment that is quite often first-time builds. So those three get the heaviest, have the heaviest impact of our sustainability goals, but it certainly proliferates everywhere. New product development, right? How's the product designed to have less carbon footprint? And it goes on and on.
So Ryan, is senior leadership also engaged from the beginning? And do you get their buy-on or is that later in the process?
So it's really 360 in that regard. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I'll give a shout out to our senior leadership. So we've got our carbon goals and specifically our scope 1 natural gas goals, because that's really where the kind of rubber hits the road in the plants today. We've got KPIs set around those that are at the absolute top of our C-suite KPI, right? They got a handful of KPIs that they track. Mine's on there, right? My scope 1 global fossil fuel consumption kilowatt hours is on there and reviewed quarterly. So it's fully integrated right to the top, all the way to the bottom.
So from a communication standpoint, everyone is aligned and knows exactly what everyone is doing, which is...
Yeah, and I got great leaders who are supportive and see the value propositions and the vision I'm pitching and selling, right? And they're bought in and here we are.
Another milestone that you've hit is the 50% reduction in scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is ahead of plan. Now that you've hit that target, what are your next steps, Ryan, in terms of implementing or exceeding your 60% target by 2030? How is that looking? And do you feel you can hit that ambitious goal?
Yeah, it's looking good. I don't want to jinx us, but end of calendar year 2025, when we have a full year of carbon accounting, under our belt, we're on track to hit our 60% goal in 2030, which was our original science aligned goal based on the 2016 baseline, based on the science aligned protocols, the 1.5 degree scenario. That's what, that science equation drove those goals. We've achieved 100% renewable. Our scope 2 is effectively driven to zero. And what that leaves us with is that ongoing focus on scope 1. It goes back to that KPI I was just talking about, our natural gas consumption, our natural gas kilowatt hours consumed annually. We've got a focus on that. And within our Gore Fabrics business, we've identified a pathway to more or less cut that fossil fuel consumption in half by 2030. We think that's feasible. We think it's realistic. We know how to do it. It's complicated, takes a lot of work, but we're optimistic we can achieve that. And within our Gore business, in addition to Gore Fabrics, Gore-Tex, in addition to leading with our products, we also want to be leaders in the space of carbon reduction in the outdoor apparel industry. So what do leaders do, right? Leaders aren't complacent. Leaders don't coast and go, oh, we hit our goal 5 years ahead of time. We're just going to, put it in neutral and coast for 5 years. We know we can do more within Gore Fabrics. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And late last year in December, we actually announced that we raised the bar on our 2030 goal from a 60% absolute reduction to now an 80%, which is above and beyond the current science, which is what the old goal was based upon. So an overall absolute reduction of 80% of our operations footprint by 2030. So I'm really proud of that. It's one of sort of been jewels of my crown in my role in Gore, and this role for me at Gore. And again, really grateful to have leadership that supports that and helps me operationalize and execute upon that.
Ryan, with respect to scope 1, have you done a lot of energy efficiency projects across your facilities?
We've done a lot of the fundamental turn the lights off, really energy conservation, don't use it in the first place. So kind of picking all those low hanging fruits was the first year or two of the journey, right? Because there was a lot to pick. Now we're in the phase of understanding how do we sort of fundamentally shift the efficiency of the operation of the building itself, of the infrastructure, right? It's beyond just turning things off now. It's how do we enable heat recovery, right? We have a lot of thermal processes. How do we enable heat recovery? Well, in order to do heat recovery, we have to reduce the hot water temps in the building to get good deltas on water temps. That's a lot more complicated than it sounds because every air handler in the building is tied to hot water, right? So we have to figure out, can we recoil those? How do we redesign those? Do we need to replace them? And that's primarily where the work is between now and 2030. That's where we're going to get that, probably half of that fossil fuel consumption reduction I mentioned is probably going to come from that. Heat recovery, again, how we heat our systems and getting off of steam, right? No longer using steam, getting to hot water, all those have 80% efficiencies, right? And you stack them up and now all of a sudden you're at 50% efficiency for a system, or we can replace those ideally with an electrified solution today, right? Which drives it to absolutely zero, but maybe not. Maybe there's a bridge in there somewhere that requires a fossil fuel asset for the near term, but gets us a 50% reduction at the same time, right? That's a win also, right? That's a win for the planet. That's a win for the business. That's a win for our buildings.
Yeah, Ryan, first half of my career was in the paper and specialty chemicals industry. And a lot of those facilities had equipment that was from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and inefficiency. And now with technology, there's so many different creative ways to get more and save money at the same time.
Yeah, it's the part I like about this the most, honestly. It's fascinating. This is where the electrical engineer, right? That part of my skill set enables this really well. Practically, I'm an energy engineer for Gore, right? Practically that's what I do every day. So all of our carbon that I'm responsible for comes from our energy, right? So everything I do is around how do we use energy more efficiently and use different types of energy.
Ryan, how is WL Gore's sustainability team integrating new materials like EPE membranes and circular models like rentals, chemical recycling into the procurement decision on the energy side?
So within our fabrics business, we're scaling our EPE throughout our consumer products. The vast majority is going to be transitioned within 2025. EPE itself requires less energy to produce than our incumbent products. So our product footprint right out of the gate gets a 20% footprint reduction just because it's less energy intensive to make EPE than it is to make our traditional EPTFE products. So that's a win right out of the gate. But still requires a lot of heavy thermal processing, requires new machines to do it. And we want to avoid fossil fuel consumption if we can. So all those new process lines that we're creating to make our new EPE membranes are all fully electric, where, the traditional machine they're replacing had a lot of natural gas components associated with it. So that's going to increase our overall electricity consumption in our facility. So can the facility handle that? Do we have enough infrastructure to handle that? Is the transformer big enough? Do we need new switch gear? How much is it going to cost? What's that going to do to our, our utility bills? Is that going to impact our demand charges, and how much? Like, gives us lots of new knobs to play with, a lot of new things to think about at the same time to make sure we get it right. Because if we get it wrong and you start tripping the main breaker on the plant, then that's a bad day for everybody. On the circularity side, we're exploring a number of different business models that really are intended to help us divorce business growth from footprint growth, right? Like, if you just grow business by selling more product, your footprint also grows with that, hopefully not as fast, but it's going to continue to grow potentially. So exploring business models that allow us to grow business without growing our footprint, rentals, gear repair. You mentioned a few. These are all still evolving, not just within Gore Fabrics, but in the outdoor apparel landscape. These are all, kind of new evolving business models. There's lots of people exploring, executing pilots in this space, which we're doing also. One of the things for Gore that's, particularly challenging is the recycling component of it. We at Gore-Tex, our products are all about durability, being better than our competitors, lasting forever, lasting a really long time. And we obsess over the durability of our laminates, and we spend all this time and energy and resources sticking laminates together, right? Making fabric stack-ups that provide the properties we want and don't fall apart, last a long time. You buy it, you can use it for 20 years. It makes it really hard to recycle, because to recycle it, you have to deconstruct it. And our products don't like to come apart by design, which makes it really difficult to play in the textile recycling industry, which is in its infancy at the moment, broadly regardless, right? Let alone the ability to handle really complex garments like ours. So a lot of what we're doing emphasizes using your gear longer, caring for your gear, repairing your gear, and I say keeping it forever, not forever, but keeping it for a really long time and keeping it in use as long as possible without having to replace it, without having to go buy another one, right? And the carbon, the sustainability footprint associated with having to buy a replacement garment. One of my favorite sayings, even before I kind of got in this role at Gore, is the most sustainable thing you can buy is the thing you already have, right? And, so taking that mindset and helping our customers get their jacket repaired when it gets a tear in it, right? Help it get repaired when the zipper has a problem, or something goes wrong with it. You can take that to a Gore certified repair facility and get it fixed. And, the garments are made to last a long time. So we want to give people the tools they need to make that happen.
And Ryan, it's working, because I had one of your jackets, wore it for many, many years. And then when my son graduated from college, he, I would say, stole my jacket and took it with him. And now he's using it. So it is very durable, and the strategy is working.
That's perfect. I have a jacket that I've been in Gore 17 years. And one of the first things I did was get a jacket, I got to get a nice Gore-Tex jacket. It's still in my closet. I know exactly where it is, right? And it's an Arc'teryx, like heavy duty pro, it's a heavy use jacket, and it's held up really well.
Works well. Switching gears a little bit. WL Gore, from my observations, it's a first mover in many ways when it comes to energy sourcing decisions. Balancing your sourcing decisions with new products that are evolving on the innovation side. And this is where you've worked a lot with us. There's a lot of conversation internally, I'm sure, that goes on to make those types of decisions. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I've said it a couple of times, and I'll say again that the work I do, our operational carbon footprint, it's all energy, right? So everything I do, there's always some energy component of it, and sourcing of that energy component of it, particularly with our carbon goals between now and 2030. And a lot of between now and 2030 is built on efficiency, which we talked about. And we've generally got good procurement energy contracts in place to get us there. But when we start looking beyond 2030, we start talking about fully electrifying facilities, electrifying processes that with steam boilers doing it, big steam boilers, the size of school buses, these things are big, right? When we start looking at electrifying those, what's our electricity demand in the future? How much is it going to cost? How do we ensure it's clean, it's renewable, it doesn't have carbon emissions associated with it, right? So those are the things that we're starting to model out in the future and understand the cost associated with those so that we can model those in our financial models. I mentioned EPE lines that are all electric. Those cost more to run than the old natural gas lines did, right? They cost more to run, right? But that product also adds more value than the old product is, right? So how does that all balance together, and making sure that the accountants, the financial planners, the business planners understand the big picture and don't get surprised when the utility bill shows up and it's twice what it was a year ago, right? So that's a big part of what I do is provide transparency to all that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a very complex model that includes a lot of different variables. So you have the whole picture.
And it's getting more complex. Right? Honestly, it's getting more complex. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Scope 3 emissions and your supply chain?
So within Fabrics, we fully mapped our Scope 3 supply chain. We've performed LCAs. We've got Scope 3 baseline, 2016, same as our Scope 1 and Scope 2. And we've got a 35% absolute reduction goal by 2030. When we roll that up with our Scope 1 and 2, it's an overall 40% reduction goal by 2030. Scope 3, it's about 80% of our total footprint in Gore Fabrics, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But within the apparel industry, it's quite small compared to a lot of our peers. Our Scope 1 and 2 is a lot higher than a lot of our industry peers based on the fact that we are both a brand and a manufacturer. You go to the store and buy a lot of garments. A lot of those are just brands, right? They just design garments and they're a brand and they work with manufacturers to manufacture the garments. At Gore, we do a lot of both. So our Scope 1 and 2 itself is proportionally higher than most of the peers in our industry. But we've got robust strategies in all three of them, working towards our 2030 goal and then looking ahead to what's after 2030, carbon neutral, 2050, or, ideally sooner.
You talked a little bit about the modeling that you're doing, looking into the future. Can you share some more insights about how you think this modeling is going to change your purchasing strategy? And if there's any specific product or technology that you see that's in development over the next 5 to 10 years that excites you?
And it's changing a lot lately, right? So, we're keeping a close eye on it and it's very dynamic at the moment, certainly at least here in the US. So we're doing our best. Partners like Constellation are great with helping us keep our eye on it. A couple of things relative to hydrogen. I don't see anywhere where that's sort of available, cost effective at scale, right? When we can get a pipe of it to our building, then that's a great conversation. But until then, it's a hard conversation to have around green hydrogen specifically. But I am hopeful and optimistic that there are opportunities there to replace natural gas with hydrogen in areas where, thermal burden is really high. You're talking really high temperatures. Maybe there's an option there. Where we've been doing more work recently is on renewables, particularly our on-site renewables. We had 2 on-site projects that came online this year in the US East in the spring. And we've got now a full summer's worth of performance data behind them, trying to understand how are they performing? Are they delivering the results we thought they would? And something that I'm excited about, I think there's a sort of an unknown opportunities. How do those potentially impact our capacity and demand charges, right? So looking at 5 CP events and grid events. Okay, I'm going on like, what was the solar doing that hour, right? Like, and it's, it's kind of coming off, but it was doing pretty good during that time. And hey, when we originally, modeled this, it wasn't to that level of detail. And capacity charges are a lot more than they were before. And that system just saved us $100,000, right? Like, so how do we model those in? And ideally, I'd like to be able to, hopefully the picture is rosy enough that we can try to figure out, do we want to do more, right? Hey, we've got some rooftop, we've got some land. Should we do more of these to increase our renewable supply? We're going to need that long term, provide really high impact projects that are behind the grid, local, new generation that helps us reduce our grid draw. And goes to the bottom line in this really dynamic capacity market.
Capacity is a great example. You saved a lot of money with the projects that you put in place. No doubt about it. Ryan, how are you with the modeling that you're doing using analytics to try to better understand the impact of the changes that you're making or do scenario planning to make sure that you're balancing strategy and risk with the business at the same time?
Yeah, there's a couple of components. So from a long-term strategy perspective, we've got what we call plant energy roadmaps, which means for everyone in my plants, I've got between now and, a 10-year horizon of exactly how much energy do we think that plant is going to consume. That facility is going to consume both in natural gas and electric based on all the energy efficiency work we're doing, the equipment that we're replacing, you're shifting loads from natural gas to electric. Production impacts, what do we think the production impacts are going to be? To try to model those out. And then what do we think the costs associated with those are going to be, and being really transparent on that. And the good news is a lot of this upfront work we've done on energy efficiency has actually got us below, that cost line. And over time, we've enabled quite a bit of cumulative savings. When you look at what our baseline energy spend was, our energy load today's prices, if we were still operating in that realm, I mean, we're millions of dollars in the green at this point relative to that. So that helps balance that long-term growth that's going to come. The other thing that we do, and one of the things that I enjoy the most doing, is we've developed energy statistical models of all of our manufacturing facilities, where we take all of our energy data, gas and electric, all of our manufacturing data, and the weather data. We've developed statistical models that predict energy consumption, right? So we get into these scenarios where we produce a little more product, which we know should use more energy, but the weather was a little warmer, right? And we tend to be in cold climates. So the weather was a little warmer. That uses less energy in theory. So then what's a good result, right? But our energy was the same. So was that good or bad? There's no way to know. Right? So we've got these models for all of our facilities now that help us understand, put those in. It'll predict an energy consumption based on a historical model set, right? We put in 5 years of data, something like that, depending on the facility. And it says, based on historical performance of this plant, with that much throughput, that weather scenario, here's how much you should use. And our goal is to get to 20% less of that number by 2030, right? And we've got there for some of our facilities already, right? We've exceeded that for most of our facilities already, actually. But it just opens up the door to all kinds of great questions and insights. And you could just start diving in. Okay, well, that didn't make sense, but we used a little more, but the weather was kind of the same, or the weather was really cold and we didn't use that much more. What caused that? Let's go learn what it is and do that in our other facilities. It's fascinating. It's one of the things I really enjoy the most about this, and an area that's really kind of, helped us. It's the flashlight. We need to find our way to the problems, right? As opposed to just kind of guessing results.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you have all the data to be able to really figure out how to continuously improve, right? Over the short and long term, which is fantastic. Ryan, one thing that Constellation and WL Gore have in common is we're very aligned in giving back to the communities and educating youth when it comes to programs tied to sustainability awareness. Can you share a little bit about WL Gore's commitment in this area?
Sure. Yeah. So no matter where you work at Gore, people are at the heart of our business. We've got a really unique culture. You can go research that separately. But people are at the heart of everything we do. And we want to be great neighbors, right? We want to be great neighbors in the communities that we have operations in. As an enterprise, most of our efforts in community engagement are also associate-led. They're all about people. We have volunteer time and grants for associates to be able to deploy in areas where they're passionate and willing to invest and dedicate their time. So much of what you see follows associate interest, right? They're not corporate edicts. They're not, we're going to do this. These are associates who have passion, are willing to do a little bit of work, spend their time on it. And when the enterprise, these associates willing to invest their time, the enterprise, the way we're set up is we follow that. The grassroots organization I shared early in this conversation is a great example of that, where we have associates who are passionate about sustainability and want to get out and clean up communities, educate the community, get in the parks and pull invasive species. Those are areas, these are just, really great examples of associates getting out, engaging in the community. If you drive by, any of our facilities here in the U.S. East, most of the local highways have, Adopt a Highway by WL Gore on. Those are voluntary. Those happen because associates got sick of looking at the litter drive. Then let's do something about it. Let's make a change. Let's adopt that highway and spend one day, an afternoon every 3 months, getting some folks in the plan out to go to clean up that highway. Earth Day is another rallying point. So Earth Day globally now, which I'm really proud of, we've put on a week of different activities in each of our regions globally, all led by associates who are volunteering, coming up with ideas. It tends to be a lot of tree planting, cleanups. Those are pretty typical, but it does look a little bit different everywhere we operate in the world. In Shenzhen, China, they're very family oriented, right? And they organized a weekend trip to the local landfill / incineration / energy generation facility, right? And so that was what they did. That's what they wanted to do. They took all their families, and that's what's important to them. So that's what happened there. In the U.S. here, we tended to plant a lot of trees and get out in Fair Hill Nature Resource Area, really close to where I'm at now, and work with the nature center there to pull weeds, pull invasive species, and improve the ecology of the local area. But it all comes down to what associates are passionate about, what they want to do, and where they're willing to invest and dedicate their time. And then that's where the enterprise follows.
That's excellent. And Ryan, we are doing things that are very, very similar to what you just said. And it's so fulfilling, right? When you get involved in one of these types of projects. Okay, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. We'll wrap up here. We do like to ask all of our guests, one last question. Is there anything that I have not asked you today that you expected, or something additional that you would like to share before we sign off?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd like to share, and I touched on a little bit earlier, but is the unique nature of Gore Fabrics in our industry as both a brand and a manufacturer, right? And as I said, that is unique. And it really helps us tie the entire value chain and supply chain together, changes that we can make and have positive ripples across the entire supply chain. As an example, our scope 1 and 2 carbon, the carbon that I'm accountable for, comes right out of our buildings, right out of our operations. That gets passed on to our customers, right? That's our customer scope 3 carbon. So when we reduce our scope 1 and 2, we get to celebrate it. We're proud of it. That helps our story, but it also reduces our customers' footprint, right? And helps their story and helps what they're trying to do. And on the flip side, when our suppliers reduce their scope 1 and 2, that reduces our scope 3, right? So things that we do, levers that we pull, things that we learn, we're teaching. We want to share them as much as possible with our suppliers so they can do the same things. And then, we can sort of co-reap all the benefits. And that's been a lot of fun. It's been really fun to see that across the industry. It's a unique challenge. Some of our suppliers are in different parts of the world, right? They're in Vietnam, they're in Taiwan. Scope 2 is really hard for them to drive to zero, to have the progress that we had. I don't know that it's realistic or fair for us to expect them to do that, right? So how do we continue to do as much as we can to benefit the industry? Respect to that leading piece, right? We can do more in scope 1 and 2. That's the carbon we're directly accountable for. It's realistic, it's feasible, and therefore we should do more. And that's exactly what we're doing. So that's one thing that I'm the proudest of.
Ryan, thanks again for joining us on Plugged In today. I have really enjoyed the conversation. It just feels good from the personal side to wear gear from a company that is so passionate about sustainability and just being so creative and innovative in terms of what you're doing to help the climate and Mother Earth. So really, truly appreciate everything WL Gore is doing.
Yeah. So thank you. This was a ton of fun, Raj. I'd just like to echo that right back at Constellation. When I joined this adventure in carbon in 2021, Gore had already had a long-standing relationship with Constellation. Our PPA for the Glover Creek Solar Project in Kentucky, that was already, I don't think the ink was dry yet, but the conversations had already started. And it's been a lot of fun working with Constellation to bring not just that online, our other projects online too, to help us get us to where we are today and where we're going in the future. So Constellation has been a great partner. As I said, the majority of our electricity consumption is here in the U.S. East in PJM. So you're a big part of our story and the success we're going to be.
Oh, thanks again, Ryan. Appreciate it.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
This is Deborah Channel from Smart Energy Decisions. We're really thrilled to have Constellation as part of Smart Energy Voices. I want to thank Chuck Hanna and the team from Constellation for making this miniseries possible. And as always, thank you to our listeners for being part of the Smart Energy Decisions community. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform, and don't forget to tell your colleagues and peers about it too. To learn about how you can become part of our online and in-person content, visit our website at smartenergydecisions.com. We're always excited to share these presentations from leaders of the energy transition. We do that in this podcast, on our website, and at our events, and it's all in the interest of helping you make those smart energy decisions.